Hey, everybody, it is Alexandra with Optimum Joy, and I have Pete, who is a mental health therapist in the office with us here to talk about self-care, which is a super, obviously, important conversation for all of life. But, I'm curious, Pete, why are we talking about self-care now, and why is it important to you?
Yeah, I think it's something I'm constantly reminding myself I need to work on, um, just like everybody else. So I realize it'd be a good topic at this time of the year too, just because it's kind of hopefully the end of winter. I don't know. It's been nice the past couple of days, so fingers
Yeah,
crossed.
fingers crossed. It's the fake
Yeah.
spring that we experienced in Chicago.
Yep. So yeah, it's just something like people self-care during the winter tends to get off the rails a bit. More time spent indoors, like all the things that you typically do in spring and summer and fall for self-care that are outdoors just get scrapped for the winter. And then you throw a pandemic on top of it this year. It just kind of felt like, you know, it was worth talking about. I also just think like it's a lot more than finding something you like doing and then just doing it repeatedly. Like I
What do
often
you
think
mean?
people,
Yeah.
yeah, I often think like people think, oh, self care. Well, I'll just, I work out 3 times a week and I will, like just do that, and that'll be like basically the only self care thing that I have. But hey, I checked off that box, and
That makes
nothing
a
more
lot of
than
that
that.
makes a lot of sense to me because there's a workbook that sometimes I'll use here in the office for like working with clients and stuff like that. But it actually has this like front and back 2 page, and it has to have like 100 things you can choose from. But it's like the big list of
Hmm,
like pleasurable activities essentially.
that's cool.
And I think that what's nice about that is like it can help people scan and be like, oh, does that sound good to me or not? But it's
Yeah,
more about in that moment, in those circumstances, what feels energetic and light, what feels restorative.
right.
And sometimes I feel like, even for me personally, I'm like, sometimes working out does feel restorative and sometimes it doesn't. And just because it's my like 3 times a week schedule,
Right.
thing as like self care, it doesn't always mean that that is going to be self care. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah. So then what is actually involved in proper self-care for people if
Yeah.
they're going to think about it in that way? It's not just something you do, it's something that you really engage with.
Hmm. Yeah. So uh, I feel that it includes 5 different categories. So I'm just going to kind of run through those.
Yeah.
Well, I'll list them off the beginning. There's physical, emotional, social, spiritual, and professional.
Mm.
Starting off with the physical aspect, this includes exercise, but not just that. Um, like I mentioned before, it's kind of easy to say, well, I go for a 30-minute run 3 times a week. So I have like physical covered.
Hmm.
But it includes more than that. It's like, are you eating things that are nutritious? Are you eating 3 meals a day? Are you bathing regularly? Like, a shower can be very refreshing, or a bath, or whatever you choose. Um, are you making and keeping appointments with healthcare providers? Um,
Mm.
and I think sleeping is often one of those parts that can just get cast aside as like, oh, it's not nice to have if I can get it. Um,
Mhm.
but getting enough sleep every night where you feel refreshed is really key. And also, I've read studies where they found we can't make up lost sleep. So yeah, like often people will think, oh, I just sleep a few extra hours on Saturday and Sunday and I'll catch right back up. But that doesn't work that way. And all it does is
Right.
just throw off our sleep schedule. So Monday morning rolls around and we're tired and it's harder for us to wake up. So,
Yeah, exactly. They're pretty
yeah.
depressing studies, honestly, but
Yeah.
it's like sleep is so there was a lot of studies too that linked like our depression and anxiety symptoms would actually dramatically decrease if people would prioritize sleep.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's so important.
Hmm.
Um, so, yeah, to improve your sleep, I would implement a bedtime routine. We can train our brains to know that it's time to start winding down for the day.
Yeah.
An example of this is just like I was thinking about this. I'm like, oh, well, when I watch my brother's kids, he's got 4 kids. When I'm putting them to bed, they have their bedtime routine. So they put their PJs on, they read a story, I spend some time praying, and then they go brush their teeth. And it's interesting throughout that whole process, like to watch them. They could have just been screaming at each other and going nuts, like around the house. But once that process kicks into gear, they're like their whole demeanor just starts to get calm and zone out a little bit, and just the switch is flipped, so to speak.
Yeah, that makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense.
yeah,
It's all those like cues that
right.
become, there's a difference between a routine, which is essentially just like probably habits we form, and then like a ritual, which is more like intentional practices that like
Hmm.
form our routines, and that sounds more like almost ritual based, and that
Yeah.
would be like intentional to shape some of that.
Hmm.
Before we move on to the next categories, I would just
Yeah.
jokingly think that I'm one of four girls, and my sisters, it's like a regular thing that sometimes we'll joke around, like when one of us is feeling blue or down or something like that, that it's kind of like, when's the last time you actually washed your hair? Because there's a
Really.
social media influencer who would just like every once in a while she'll be like, just want to remind everybody that like if you haven't taken a bath, like if you haven't bathed today, you really should. It'll make you feel better.
It's
And
so
that
true.
is like hands down, every single time one of us says that to each other, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, like it's time or whatever. And it makes us feel like infinitely better about our lives. So it's
You
like
know,
small things.
yeah, yeah, it totally is. And another thing with the bedtime is just your phone. It's good to, just, I think it's good to kind of cut ties with your phone for the last half hour of the day. And yeah, like even if do something like put it into a box that's by your bedside that just puts it out of sight, out of mind. If you use it as your alarm, you're still going to be able to hear your alarm through the box. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just getting out of the habit of when I lay down, I turn on my phone and I scroll for another half hour when I could be
Right.
sleeping. Yeah.
Honestly, I think that the do not, not everybody's probably an iPhone user, but the
Mm-hmm.
do not disturb automatic feature,
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I implemented a while ago, not a long time ago, that at 9:30 p.m., it basically turns on automatically on do not disturb until 7:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
And that's very often I'll be like, oh, my phone hasn't like rang for a little bit, and it's just because it's on do not disturb. And it's
Right.
like it's an automatic thing that
Mm-hmm.
technology can be used to implement some of that too.
Yeah. Super helpful. It's nice that the
Hmm.
technology companies did that for
I know exactly.
us.
Well,
So
what about
yeah,
the emotional section?
yeah. So emotional, that can include things like daily journaling, just showing gratitude, venting, processing things that happen during the day. Um, so yeah, really quick, another study shows that the part of our brain that responds to gratitude absorbs the gratefulness, and then it has a lasting effect. So like if you spend, tomorrow morning 5 minutes just thinking about things that you're grateful for or journaling about them, that can last you for days. If you don't do it
Mm-hmm.
again for another couple of days, that part of your brain will still be feeling the effects of that
Wow.
time of gratitude. Um, and just kind of spending time being vulnerable with people you trust. Obviously people you trust is the important part, but share whatever problems you're experiencing, and be an empathetic ear to others. Learn new hobbies and skills that aren't related to work or school. That's important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just taking a vacation can just be an easy thing. Doesn't have to be even out of town.
I think probably the point of it is to just go into vacation mode
Yeah.
more than like an elaborate, beach vacation on an island somewhere.
Right. Right. Which is
Mm-hmm.
nice if you can get it, but
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
yeah. So as far as social goes, during the pandemic, this has been a bit more of a difficult thing to do. But just because we can't see people face to face doesn't mean we can't connect in some way with loved ones. You can always just text or call a friend, just check in, see how things are going. I know my friends and I, we have a whiskey club, and
Oh,
uh,
fun.
yeah, we haven't been able to meet for several months though. So what we've been able to do is just have Zoom calls, and then we just drink whatever whiskey's at our house and kind of spend time catching up with one another. That's been
Mm-hmm.
that's been nice to have about once a month or so.
I'm like, I like whiskey. How can I get invited to this whiskey friends
Yeah,
party
right.
team? I'll let you
Right.
send me my invite offline. So
Perfect. Done.
yeah.
uh, so yeah, and also like even writing letters, if that seems like your sort of thing, then
You
go
know,
for it.
Interestingly enough, I have quite a few friends that no longer live in the same area that I do. One lives
Yeah.
in Poland, some live in Rwanda now, and they're just, or some of them just like moved out of Chicago, so they don't live that far, but we don't see each other on a regular basis. And
Mhm.
this is something my sister kind of inspired me to do. I started writing letters,
Cool.
just like to those people in different countries, even specifically, as a
Sure.
way to be like, this is what's going on in my life, what's going on in your life, as a way to keep up. And it
Yeah.
has like kind of a romanticized thing, but it's really
Yeah.
nice. And there's something very soulful about writing a letter to somebody. So,
Yep. Yep.
hmm
There's a reason why they did it for so long.
no.
um, yeah, and then jump into spiritual. This can just be spending time out in nature. Um, it could be meditating, praying, appreciating some form of art. So it could be music, movies, TV, reading a book, etc. I think helping others is also part of this, and that's a great way to improve your mood. It gets you focused on other people, pulls your
hmm
attention off of yourself and whatever you're struggling with. So it can be kind of a helpful distraction.
Even just to add to something that you already said earlier, Pete, to the
Yeah.
spiritual list, is gratitude is
Mm-hmm.
in and of itself a spiritual practice. So if it's
Right.
something that was improving I think you had it in the most emotional category
Mm-hmm.
about just like taking that space to recenter yourself around gratitude. I think that that also is a very spiritual practice
Mm-hmm.
um, to incorporate in life. And there's a lot of like spiritual benefits of practicing gratitude.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And then lastly is the dreaded professional aspect. Yeah. I think this can be a little tougher. It takes some like internal strength to be able to create boundaries at work, say no to projects you just know you can't handle on your plate right now, um,
hmm
and just also maintain a healthy work-life balance. Take breaks while you're on the job. Get to know your fellow employees. When we're back in the office, um, actually stop by other people's desks and just spend 5 minutes catching up. Um, yeah.
This one seems the hardest to implement, I think, because
Uh,
we live in a very capitalistic corporate society. So depending on your industry,
mhm.
this one I think is also like hard to implement because you don't know like the wrath or repercussions that will come from
Right.
setting a boundary. Like you
Right.
really may um, lose out on a promotion or be viewed as like not a good team player or just some of these different things at work.
Right.
Um, so that kind of brings up a wider self-care question about like, as you're planning your career and vocational journey all of your life, are you
Right.
at a place that feels like a healthy work environment? Because
Mm-hmm.
if it is kind of toxic or not great, that might be a prompt to maybe make some changes even in like your vocational world if there isn't
Yeah.
space to do some of these different things.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
So, what's something like, I always like to think, how can we help people practically implement this stuff? So, are there any like resources or recommendations that you think would be helpful to people as they're even in the midst of COVID, like a long enduring COVID,
Yeah.
plus it's just self care is like generally good for us? What would be helpful to people?
Yeah. So I thought of a couple.
Mhm.
First one would just be to take some time to journal. So ask yourself how you're doing in each of these categories, the five that I listed, what you could add, how you can improve on something you're already doing, um, and just be honest with how things are going while you're journaling. So don't lie to yourself that
Well,
you've got to.
you have to know where you're starting so you can
Yeah.
know where you're going, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're really
Exactly.
just not good, if you're not in a good
That's
place, just be
okay.
like, I'm
Yeah.
not in a good place. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And also make your goals specific and measurable. So instead of, uh, like I'm just going to start exercising, you could say I'm going to do jazzercise 3 times per week for a half hour, or journal for 10 minutes every night before bed, type of thing.
Mm.
Quick jazzercise plug because my wife and sister-in-law are way into it. Anyway, the second one is just making sure that you set up some strong boundaries to protect your self-care. It can be easy to push our needs aside. There's a lot of fears that we have about saying no to others, and oftentimes we'll think that valuing self-care is selfish. Like valuing myself is a selfish thing. I'm not thinking of others. That's wrong. But the truth is, if you don't help yourself enough, then you'll end up in an unhealthy place and you won't be able to help anyone at that point.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. I like to think about self-care as almost like it's similar to the concept of boundaries, but if I
mhm,
choose to be a healthy, whole, filled up person, then I can show up
yeah,
in relationships over the long haul, I'm not going to get burnout or need to quit on
Yeah.
things and stuff. I actually can show up in the long haul. And even, the biggest cost to companies, even going back to like the professional world and how hard that is, the biggest cost to companies is not being able to retain their workers and
Yeah.
onboarding new workers. So
Yeah.
I think we can think about that from a personal standpoint too, that the most that you're going to get out of your life is if you can stay in a really sustainable, healthy place and don't have to change things dramatically. So, and that's
Yeah.
a prompt to workplaces to make it
Right.
caring,
We've all,
so
yeah, we've all probably worked at those places at some point in our lives. So
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Pete, it's been really great to have you on here to talk about this. I
Yeah.
think especially because it is an important, like, sustainable life concept. And again, you and I were talking offline just about how COVID is an enduring presence in our lives.
Yeah.
So we have to think about self-care a little creatively and in a way that would um, just kind of make us whole, healthy people for the long haul, considering we're
Yep.
kind of still in the long haul a little bit. So all of these things
Right.
are applicable outside of COVID, but they're definitely applicable in COVID as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Agree.
thanks for coming on here. I really enjoyed it, and we will touch base soon.
Yep. Talk soon.
Thanks, Pete. Bye-bye.